dude. Come on. I just can't get into the rhythm of it. Sounds to me like you suck at rhythm games. Hi-Fi Rush is a game that was announced recently at the Xbox Developer Direct event that we live streamed here on the channel, so you can still find the VOD if you are curious to hear all the things that were talked about in that particular event. And one of those things was this game. And to be honest, this game was kind of like the highlight of the whole event for me, because all of the other games are not really things that I'm too interested in. Like, I think that they're doing a good job on the games that they showed. I don't think that they're bad games by any stretch, but they weren't really that interesting to me. On the other hand, when they showed Hi-Fi Rush, which was a game that wasn't really planned, it was kind of like a surprise that they put in that event, that was one that definitely caught my attention because it is an action game. It also involves a little bit of rhythm, which is something that I don't tend to mess around with too much, but it looked like really fun. And the other thing that called to me is that this is a studio that is kind of like getting away from their usual type of games that they work on, because this is from Tango Gameworks, which the previous two games that they worked on are the Evil Within series, of which you have Evil Within 1, Evil Within 2, and Ghostwire Tokyo, which are kind of like games that are related to the horror genre. One of the higher-ups at Tango Gameworks is actually Shinji Mikami, who has also worked on games like Resident Evil, as well as Condemned. What was the name of that game? Shadows of the Damned. Sorry, I said Condemned. Shadows of the Damned. But more interestingly, one of the things that I wasn't aware is that he also directed a game that I really, really like, which is Vanquish. And I was like, oh, how very interesting. And that's kind of like relevant for Hi-Fi Rush, even though I don't know what was Shinji Mikami's level of involvement in the game. He was definitely present during the presentation that we watched during the Xbox Developer Game Conference. Now, another really cool aspect of Hi-Fi Rush is the fact that this was a game that was announced and released on the same day, which is extremely refreshing in an industry where we're constantly seeing games getting delayed. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for games getting delayed and coming out in a good state, but it's just so rare that you actually just see a game, oh, we're working on this game, here's some gameplay, blah, 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 blah. By the way, it releases right now. And I like that. I always like these kinds of like surprises. And for people that happen to have Game Pass, if you are a Game Pass subscriber, this just added, a little bit more value to your Game Pass, because basically it was kind of like, oh, it releases today, and if you have Game Pass, boom, you already have it. You can go download it, all of that good stuff. And I was like, see, this is a cool thing. Now, Bethesda was kind enough to send me a code so that I could check it out and tell you guys my opinions on it. And I've actually been enjoying the game quite a bit. I struggled with it a little bit in the start, but that was because of something very specific to my setup that has to do with latency. It's very important that if you want to play this game, there can be like no real latency in your setup in terms of like when you hear the sound between the sound actually getting outputted from your console or from your PC onto a TV. If there's like a little bit of a delay, like a Bluetooth speaker or a Bluetooth headset or something like that, and if there's even like 200 milliseconds of delay, that is going to kind of like impact the experience. So do pay attention to that. That was something that I struggled with because I was completely sucking at the start. I was like, bro, I was not aware that my rhythm was this bad. And then I was like, oh no, it's just there's a delay in my setup, and that's a problem. So anyway, but once I sorted that out, the game is extremely fun. It is one of those concepts that you actually I personally don't tend to see that much. The one game that I can think of that did something similar to this would probably be Crypt of the Necrodancer, which then they also worked on something called the Cadence of Hyrule, where you actually, you would move and attack with your character to the rhythm of a beat. But I feel like they have a better understanding of how players interact with those types of games in this one, because I found that it is kind of like easier to stay on beat, and you're not as punished for going off beat so long as you don't get hit, because it is an action game. You still have stuff like dodges, grabs, and other things that you can kind of do, even parries. I mean, I was just introduced to parries because I'm still kind of like in the early, I think I did like, what, 4 levels of the game? I'm not 100% sure, but like, I'm still fairly early in the game, so to speak. So I don't know all of the moves, but I got parry, dodge, attack, heavy attack, all of those things, and then you can combo those together and you unlock different combos. So it is like a full-fledged action game. Well, you might be thinking, oh, because of the rhythm aspect, they're going to skimp out on some of the action elements. I really don't think so. There's plenty of complexity there. And depending on the difficulty that you're playing, you're going to have to interact more or less with that particular complexity. I've been playing the game on the hard difficulty, which to me feels just right. It gives me a certain level of failure where it's not like, oh, I can just get hit repeatedly and get away with it. It's like, no, you get hit once and it's actually, oh, this actually kind of hurts. And it actually requires you to stay on beat a little bit. And the cool thing is, if you stay on beat, you're constantly filling up a meter that is also giving you like special attacks and stuff like that. So you are extremely incentivized to stay on beat, and it is extremely fun because, it just feels good to attack enemies to the rhythm of the music, and just listening to the kind of visual and audio feedback that you are producing. But this is naturally only going to work for people that appreciate the musical style that the game has, which so far it's mostly been rock. Now, I'm not going to classify the specific type of rock because I'm not a particularly musically inclined person. To me, it's like, hey, it's got electric guitars, it's got drums, I'm into it. Like, I just tend to like that kind of music quite a bit, so it works a lot for me. But if you don't like this type of music, you are most definitely not going to enjoy the game. Like, don't even try, because you're constantly listening to music, and you're constantly having to fight enemies to the beat of the music. So this is only going to work if you enjoy that type of music. You're not going to force yourself to play through this because you're just going to be like, bro, I can't stand it. So there's actually some actual named licensed music in the game. Stuff from Black Eyed Peas, there's some stuff from Nine Inch Nails and other bands, but they also have some original tracks in there, and they have a streamer mode and whatnot, which, by the way, big ups for the fact that they put in a streamer mode. Nowadays, there's still a lot of publishers that don't realize that, hey, we're just going to license a track, and then somebody's playing their game on YouTube or on Twitch and like, oh, crap, here come the copyright strikes. So it's very nice of them to actually do that, and, that's a big plus for me. But anyways, overall, this kind of like describes what the game is about. The game has elements of brawling, action, fighting, as well as platforming. There's actually quite a bit of platforming, more platforming than I would have expected. There's elements of you picking up items and actually doing exploration in these levels. And when I say exploration, I'm not talking about open world exploration. I'm talking about like, hey, here's a set path that they kind of expect you to take. You are incentivized to stray away from that set path into little nooks and crannies where you can actually encounter, some additional stuff, like, for instance, gears or parts. The basic things that you usually get in these types of action games. So you'll get certain parts that once you collect 4 or 5 of them, they will increase your health. Once you collect 4 or 5 of something else, it will increase your special gauge, and so on and so forth. That type of stuff. And then there's also gears, which is kind of like the basic currency that you get in this game that allows you to unlock additional combo moves, as well as additional special moves, and even some passive effects, because there's also a system that allows you to put in ships for passive effects and whatnot. But it's not overly complex, right? It's not a stripped down action experience. It feels like there was actual thought put into this. It's not just like, oh, we're a rhythm game, we're going to hide behind the fact that we're a rhythm game, we're going to skimp out on this. No, there's a full-fledged action game there, but it's not completely overwhelming. So you'll be able to wrap your head around it reasonably easy, at least in my opinion. So let's start by talking a little bit about the visuals, which I still haven't talked about. The game looks great, in my opinion, but I already know that this art style is not going to work for everyone. It's a very stylized game, kind of like cartoony, cel shading, that type of stuff. And there are a lot of transitions where they go into just straight up animation with the character and then, jump you back into the action and whatnot. Almost like it feels very comic book. It's got a lot of comic book vibes, and you'll even see certain filters that you would usually see on like certain comic book styles and stuff like that. So that's the style that they're going for. And like I said, I think that this is not going to vibe with everybody, but I think it is a pretty nice art style. I personally like it, and you can see from the footage here if you like it or not. Which, by the way, some of the footage that I'm going to be using in this video is going to include a section of a level that was like AR. So if you see like a green scan line effect, that's just part of that specific level. The game doesn't always look like that, so don't be scared. It's just, I don't want to show too much of the game, so I only took a very small slice of gameplay because I don't want to reveal too much so that you guys can experience the game for yourselves. But yeah, overall, in terms of visuals, I like it. In terms of performance, you know, I have a pretty beefy rig, but the game felt like it was pretty well optimized. I didn't really get any frame drops whatsoever, and if you see any, it's because of the method that I had to use to record the gameplay, because this latency thing required me to record in a very different way that I usually record. That actually impacted a little bit of performance. That is because of the recording. When you're actually playing without recording, there was no performance hit whatsoever. And in terms of animations, I think that the animations are friggin' fantastic. I think they did a really good job, and the game just feels really fun to play. The animations feel very responsive. It's pretty good. In terms of sound, the sounds are good. The soundtrack, like I said, it's going to be pretty much hit or miss for most people. If you like rock, this is going to be right up your alley. If you don't like rock, you're probably going to hate it. As a matter of fact, if you don't like rock, and you know, if you don't like electric guitars, drums, that type of stuff, the music that you are listening to in the background of this video, this game ain't for you. Let me just put that right out there. As a matter of fact, that this game actually made me wonder. Like, I think one of the people that would have loved to be involved in this game would probably have been Jack Black. It's like, you know, this almost feels like it was a game tailor-made for Jack Black to participate in it. I don't know if he shows up later or something like that, or even if he's involved in the project. He's probably not. But it just seems like it was tailor-made to involve like some kind of Jack Black participation. But anyway, that is the visuals, the sound. In terms of the story is okay. It's nothing groundbreaking or anything, at least so far from what I've played. But again, I haven't really... I don't even know how many hours I put into it. Probably somewhere around 4 or 5 hours, something like that. It's all right. It's the traditional thing of like, we're being oppressed by this mega corporation. We're gonna fight back, and that's kind of like the overarching plot that we've seen so far. We're sticking it to the man, basically. The gameplay itself involves, like I said, platforming, brawling, action fighting, and quite a few quick time events. That's another thing. If you don't like quick time events, this game ain't gonna be for you. Like, it requires quite a bit, and some of them I actually struggle with. Like, there's this one dude that you have to do a mechanic with him where he punches stuff for you. And I found that the timing that you need to get that stuff right, I struggle with that one a little bit. That's one of the few things that I do struggle with. But overall, I don't think that QTEs are too terrible, and they're not like overblown, right? And once you start getting into the rhythm of the game, some of the stuff that happens, like in certain combos, you'll require to do some QTEs. Once you get into the rhythm of it, you'll find that the game is actually quite forgiving with a lot of that stuff. And again, I'm playing on hard, which has a bit of a tighter window with some of these things. But it's quite unique, basically. Like, it's not something that you see that often in video games. And it is one of those things that is, for me personally, I find extremely satisfying to just see the beat evolve and listening to the sounds that you're doing, which also involve like guitar riffs and stuff like that, as you are performing well and you hear the crowd going, hey, hey, hey. It's kind of like constant crescendo as you are hitting enemies. It can get quite overwhelming with all of the different types of things that you're expected to do. Like, there are some enemies that you have to parry, some enemies that you have to break in a very specific way in order for you to be able to actually deal damage to them. Some enemies have shields. There's quite a bit there. Like I said, this is full-fledged action. It does require to do specific things in order to tackle specific situations, and it can get a little bit overwhelming at times when there's too much happening on screen. Like, one of the examples was like, there was an enemy who would put a pull down, shield everybody else, and at the same time there would be volcanoes shooting lava into the arena, constantly dropping AoEs, and there would be other enemies that were pretty tough. And so you had to like, okay, I gotta dodge this lava, gotta dodge the attacks from the enemies or parry them, gotta destroy this pillar that is shielding everybody else, in order to be able to actually deal damage, while all this lava is still raining in, and it gets really, really wild the more you advance. But like I said, it's also extremely satisfying when you get it right. Now, I do have a bit of a complaint that I have with at least the earlier moments of the game, and that has to do with the pacing, because this game has quite a unique combat system to it, with the whole action combat rhythm-based stuff, and it's going to take, at least for me, it took quite a while for me to get used to the timing of the button presses and all of that stuff. And as I was advancing through all of the different combat scenarios that the game was presenting to me, I was like, okay, I think I understand how this works. Let's wait until we get into the next combat. And then they would give me a long platforming section. And then by the time I would get to the next stretch of combat, I would be like, okay, let me try to relearn this thing that I think I kind of got. Now it kind of like get to that point where I'm like, okay, I think I know how this works. And then there's another long platforming section. Like, I wish that some of those combats, particularly early on in the game, were a little bit lengthier. Like, give me more enemies to fight so that I can fully understand how the system works. And then there were these robots that pretty much explain everything to you a second time, which I guess was something that they realized, oh, maybe people aren't going to have enough time to actually understand how this works, so we're going to put these robots in here. And I found that those were just annoying. I'm like, no, I want to test my stuff in a live scenario. I don't want to test my stuff against a punching bag, because that's kind of boring. Punching bags don't fight back. I need to be able to do these things whilst also dodging and get into a rhythm, which is why I only felt like I was starting to get into a rhythm with things when I got to like the third level, which, you know, I feel like if they tightened up the pacing a little bit more there at the start, where we had more combat scenarios to be a little bit, you know, to further study the combat system and how it works, I think that would have been a better thing. But that's pretty much the only criticism that I have so far. The game has been extremely fun, and I'm kind of like having a blast with it. I would recommend it if you like the concept of what I am talking about, and if you like this style of music. I think it'll be a fun game, but I'm not sure how it's going to be in terms of length. I would expect something like this to be like, I don't know, anywhere between 10 and 20 hours. I have a friend of mine who's much further ahead, and he feels like he's coming close to the end, and his prediction was like, oh, this is probably going to last like 15, 20 hours. I haven't seen any reviews or anything like that, so I don't actually know. I do believe there's going to be a degree of replayability, because there are certain doors that I found that you couldn't get in, which are things that I believe are going to be unlocked later for like bonus runs and maybe even harder difficulty runs and stuff like that. So I do believe that there's going to be a degree of replayability, but overall, this is just one of those games that is like, it's a feel-good game. You jump in there, you get a couple of hits, you listen to some beats, you chill out, and it's pretty cool stuff. And I think this is actually an even more fun game if you, like, for instance, if you're a content creator, if you're a streamer or something like that. I think this is more fun if you are not streaming, because of the fact that you can listen to the licensed tracks, which you can't do if you are streaming or recording footage. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Those are my thoughts on Hi-Fi Rush. I think it's pretty fun. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section down below. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.
Pretty rock star move, Chai.